Hello and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is a Ukraine war update news segment for the 9th of March 2023. Before we get to the usual opening gambit of losses for the Russians for the day before, let's talk about the huge missile attack last night on, basically all of Ukraine. Lots to be said about this. 81 launches in total, including 8 drones. So that would be 73 missiles. The makeup of those missiles is absolutely vital to talk about. But the first thing to note is that is fewer missiles than we've had previously. That is not the 100+ missiles that we've seen in months gone by. Again, this is an indication that Russia do not have the stockpiles of missiles to send. Otherwise, I assume they would have done. There were 70 odd missiles, and it has to be said that there's 3 weeks between the last missile attack and this one. So that is I think the longest there has been between missile attacks. Again, what hypothesis does that better support? That they are running short on missiles? They're not running short on missiles. It looks like they are running short on missiles. And when we look at the makeup of these missiles, that's fascinating as well. So let's have a look at what No Report says. 28 KH-101, KH-555, 20 caliber missiles. And then 6 KH-22, 6 KH-47 Kinzhal, 2 KH-31P, 6 X-59, 13 S-300s, and 8 Shahed drones. Half the drones were shot down, so that's 50% of drones. That's not great. Now, the percentage of interceptions is actually overall is about 60%, so it's not great. But the reason why is not necessarily because the air defense systems are not in place, but because of the type of missiles that are making up this missile attack. We have had 6 Kinzhals, which are the hypersonic ballistic missiles that basically Ukraine can't shoot down. And I'm going to talk about them in some depth in a second. It's 13 S-300 missiles that are used in a ground-to-ground attack mode. These are, again, sort of ballistic missiles that have a very high velocity, and Ukraine will struggle to shoot those down as well. And in fact, a number of these. So really, of the 34 of the 48 cruise missiles, your bog standard cruise missiles, were shot down, giving a 71% interception rate, which is okay. That's pretty good. It has been better though. So it could be a case of Russia learning. They've been firing off a bunch of missiles over time. They've been throwing up waves of drones, but also the odd drone here and there to try and, I assume, work out where the missiles are. But also, their missile attack last night was across the whole of Ukraine rather than saturating weak points. So I'm not 100% sure that they were optimal. If I was the Russians, I might have done something different, but hey, they probably know more than I do, you would assume. So it's been a difficult night. There's been lots of hits. Let's go and have a look at the hits before we look at the missiles. So, due to Russian terror attacks across Ukraine on the power grid, Russian-occupied nuclear power plant in Zaporizhia had to be de-energized. So emergency power, the power plant has to kick in order to keep the cooling running. So this is counterproductive for the Russians. They've hit the energy system, but that actually has a knock-on effect for the nuclear power station that they control. Ukrainian authorities concern missile attacks have hit critical energy infrastructure in Kiev. So that is in Kyiv. So that's pretty big explosions going on there. That looks like a thermal power plant. CHP-5 power plant near Kyiv, probably hit by Kinzhal missiles. 40% of the Ukrainian capital is without power. But aside from the energy infrastructure being hit, they're also incredibly ineffective missiles, or at least inaccurate missiles. 4 people, 2 men and 2 women, were killed in Zolokiv Rayon in Ukraine's western Lviv Oblast. So this has gone an awful long way to the west of Ukraine as a result of the Russian missile falling in a residential area. So they're just basically 3 random houses and in a village hit. Three houses, 3 cars, and a garage were destroyed. Yeah, a big crater here, huge crater from a Russian missile near Kharkiv. Civilians standing around it, and one can hope that nobody got hurt from this Russian terrorist attack, says Tendar. Again, big missile crater. Doesn't look like that was anywhere particularly important. So again, inaccurate. don't know what the target was here, but it seems to have fallen in a field somewhere. And it appears, I mean, this is internet networking, so, but I think that's reflective of power usage. So network tracking metrics indicate that the Ukrainian power grid is recovering from overnight Russian missile attacks, though Kharkiv and Zhytomyr oblasts have been much slower to recover. There's a lot of resilience now built into the power grid. They shut down a power while the attacks go on, because that reduces the amount of damage that can be done, and they've got used to fixing things up. So 3 weeks, and they would have fixed an awful lot of stuff. Now you might think, oh, this is pointless, like Sisyphean rock rolling, endless process of building stuff and then it getting blown up, building it again, getting it blown up. But if they rebuild these, whatever it is, targets, then that means the Russians have to blow them up again rather than use those missiles to hit another target and further cripple and further cripple. So although it might seem pointless rebuilding things for them to be blown up again, actually that is entirely the point. Rebuild these. They're using those expensive rockets again on them. Rebuild again, and by doing that, you're saving other places from being hit. So there is that to consider. So it has been a pretty horrible night for the Ukrainians. Right, let's go back and look at particularly the Kinzhal. Now, there were 6 Kinzhal used, and we've not seen these being used in that number ever before. In fact, I think there's only been like one used. Possibly 2 have been used. One was involved in an aircraft exploding as it went off the runway in Baalbek Airport in Crimea, which I reported on some time back. So, as OSINT Technical says here, Russian forces appear to be heavily invested in degrading Ukrainian power generation capabilities, expending valuable Kh-47M2 Kinzhal hypersonic missiles to do so. The question is this worth it? I mean, I suppose they've got to be used at something, but these are really high value missiles being used here. What is a Kinzhal? Okay. It has a claimed range of more than 2,000 kilometers, 1,200 miles, a Mach 12 speed, 2.5 miles per second. I mean, these are incredibly fast, and an ability to perform evasive maneuvers at every stage of its flight. It can carry both conventional and nuclear warheads and can be launched from Tu-22M3 bombers or MiG-31K interceptors. I think at the moment they can only be launched from MiG-31s. Because it flies at hypersonic speeds within the atmosphere, the air pressure in front of it forms a plasma cloud as it moves, absorbing radio waves. This is called plasma stealth. So that actually stops radio waves from being able to seek it out and find out where it is, as far as I understand it. Correct me if I'm wrong. The high speed of the Kinzhal gives it better target penetration characteristics than lighter, slower cruise missiles. With advanced maneuvering capabilities, high precision, and hypersonic speed, some sources give it the name carrier killer due to its alleged ability to disable and possibly even sink a 100,000-ton supercarrier with a single strike. What happens is these fly up into the atmosphere and they get a huge amount of speed going and then come down getting a huge amount of speed going. And that speed makes them very difficult to take out the skies. And there are no systems in Ukraine really that can do anything against such a missile. So according to unconfirmed reports, a MiG-31 thought to be carrying a Kinzhal crashed on takeoff from the airbase in Belbek on the 1st of October last year. On the 26th of January this year, according to Ukrainian Air Force, 55 missiles were fired at targets in Ukraine, along with another 24 Shahed drones. The Ukrainian Air Force claims to have shot down all of the drones and 47 of the missiles. Included in the attack was a Kinzhal hypersonic missile. Kiev's mayor said 1 person died and 2 were wounded when an apartment block was hit in a Holosy district. And I think there are claims elsewhere of Kinzhals being used. What are these? This is an article from, I think it's from January this year, but referring to previous to stuff going on last year. So these are completely new hypersonic cruise missiles, they call them, that have not been used by any country before. The X-47M2 is launched from an aircraft which has to be specially equipped to carry such missiles, despite the fact that the Russian army put the Kinzhal into service in 2017. Today, only modified MiG-31 interceptors can be their carriers. Therefore, despite the tangible potential danger of a single missile, Russians will not be able to launch a lot of them. In addition, experts believe the aggressor country only has a few of these weapons. Theoretically, this should create a small additional. So then it goes on to talk about the plasma shield, if you like. Theoretically, this should create small additional radio interference, but also has a negative effect on the body of the device. In flight, the rocket should look as if it were in a fiery cocoon. Despite all the claims of the Russians about the incredible effectiveness of the new weapon, experts are not inclined to overestimate its revolutionary nature. So basically, Russia claimed and are claiming that the US doesn't have a an answer to these hypersonic missiles, as in they don't have their own hypersonic missiles that are as good as these. The only principal feature of the new missiles is their speed. It has two main consequences. The first is that the missile is extremely difficult to intercept. The second consequence of the high speed of the missile is its ability to pierce any armor before the explosion. That is why they are primarily seen as a means against large ships and bunkers. Quote, there are no means that can detect and shoot down such ultra-fast Kinzhal missiles. This is a missile flying at a ballistic trajectory. The MiG-31 delivers it into the upper layers of the atmosphere, launches it there, and it is already flying and descending at a tremendous speed to the target. Yuri Ihnat, the speaker of the Ukrainian Armed Forces Air Force, said on the broadcast of the National Marathon. Financial Times yesterday, before this happened, did a piece, a military briefing. What difference will U.S. Patriots make to Ukraine's defense? So there are some claims that Patriots can help here. The Patriot system interceptors have a longer range, up to 75 kilometers, giving a 150-kilometer radius, depending on the munitions used, and are more accurate than the Soviet-designed S-300s and books that make up the backbone of Ukraine's air defenses. Crucially, they can shoot down fast-moving ballistic missiles that Russia is likely to use in greater numbers as it depletes its stocks of subsonic cruise missiles. Well, this was very prescient, this article. Although, in principle, they can shoot them down, it doesn't necessarily mean they will be able to shoot down these easily. It would be my conclusion. Patriot are going to be your best bet, but it's not a given. How do you shoot down a ballistic missile if they're launched with a fairly large radius of action, and if it is launched from the stratosphere, in fact, into space, and then it flies down at a huge speed along its radius? Colonel Yuri Ignat, again, a spokesman for Ukraine's Air Force, in an interview said with the Financial Times earlier this month, the Patriot can. So he's confident the Patriot can help here. And Moscow is attempting to procure hundreds of ballistic missiles from Iran in return for military support for Tehran, say US and UK officials. Ukraine's military says it has nothing in its arsenal to intercept them. US supplied Patriot missile systems in Saudi Arabia and the UAE have proved effective at shooting down Iranian-designed ballistic missiles fired by Houthi rebels in Yemen. So the Patriots will provide an extra layer of defense from other missiles, but whether they will work for sure is another question. So Patriots will add another layer to Ukraine's already complex multi-layered air defenses. On top of the S-300s and books, Ukraine has acquired two NASAM systems, the Norwegian launchers and US munitions, and state-of-the-art Iris-T defense unit from Germany, with 3 more expected next year. These are highly accurate but have a range of only 40 kilometers. Ukraine has also been supplied with older air defense systems such as Hawks from Spain and Crotale, or rattlesnakes from France. In addition, it has been given thousands of shorter range shoulder-launched missiles such as Slings and Starstreaks, and 30 Gepard anti-aircraft cannon from Germany. Now, I watched, because that's how cool I am. I watched these guys who do sort of simulations, computer simulations, and they've done computer simulation of a target, say a power station here, and they've put an Iris-T system and a Patriot system here, and fired from a distance on the computer, obviously, 4 Kinzhal rockets at this, so 4 at the same target. So that will be highly unlikely, I would think. But Russia would use up 4 for the same target, but they could do. And they did Gepards, then they did Iris-T, and then they did Patriot, and I think, and then they did them all together. And only when they were used all together, and when they had set these into God mode, i.e., they were operating at the best they possibly could, they were already at their high state of readiness, and everyone using them was doing the best job they can, type thing. You can set all the parameters. And when they did that, they shot the Kinzhals down, and they all kind of worked together. But on their own, they were less capable. I think the Patriot did maybe a few of them. maybe IRIS-T did one when it was on its own. I can't remember, but basically you needed all of them working together to take out 4 Kinzhal. But whether that would definitely be the case, I don't know, and whether that reflects reality is another question. But anyway, we're in uncharted territory really here with regard to the use of these kind of missiles. So going back to the figures, when you look at only a 60% ratio for all of these, that is representative. I mean, you might think that's great for the Russians, but then it depends how you frame this. In one sense, it's not great because they're having to use their very best missiles to take out, you know, what could arguably be not what these were designed to. I think they were initially designed to take out carriers. Like that's what moving carriers is it's their primary sort of design criteria, I think. But if Russia are putting energy infrastructure as their number one objective, then okay, they're going to be they are using their very best missiles to do that, but they're using up quite a lot of them, and it looks like Ukraine will be back on its energy feet at some point fairly soon. Like this isn't crazy damaging. I mean, the Kiev power station looks in a pretty bad state. That could be a bit of a problem there. But I how what this represents is interesting. There's going to be some discussion as to whether this shows that Russia is in the driving seat here in like causing damage and being a real problem for Ukraine, or you could frame it as Russia are desperate because they're using their very best missiles and they're using them up and they don't have many of these missiles to use. We'll see where the discussion goes. Okay, going to the Russian losses for yesterday, as according to Ukraine. Caveats: inaccurate propaganda. Russia don't produce the same figures, all that kind of stuff. Take all my claims with a pinch of salt, etc., etc., etc. Just got to please YouTube. 590 liquidated personnel, so that's gone right back down, and that could represent that Ukraine haven't been using their own HIMARS to hit troop accumulation. It could represent the fact that it's calmed down maybe a little bit around Bakhmut, as it looks like the Russians are sort of culminating, but not. Well, the thing about Bakhmut is it's doubled in it's gone from a 30-kilometer front line to a 60-kilometer front line. So Wagner have fewer troops now. They're struggling with troops. They're struggling with recruitment. Prigozhin has admitted this. They're struggling with ammunition, and their front line has doubled in size. And this means that there's going to be less going on in any individual place, almost certainly. But I don't know. The figures are less than previous days. 5 tanks, 13 APCs, 2 artillery systems, 1 anti-aircraft system, 1 vehicle and fuel tank, 1 special equipment. So fairly average. 13 APCs is pretty damaging, but fairly average on that front. And there's no aircraft listed there, but we have a Russian Su-25 was shot down using a Piran missile. I think that was actually shot down on March 6th, but only reported yesterday. So that might have been one of those aircraft that we did have on the stats, or we might see that tomorrow. Not 100% sure. Okay, what else has been going on? So large fire and occupied Enerhodar, so that's near the nuclear power plant. It's not yet known what is on fire. So this is before last night's missile attacks, and whether it is related to military activity. So something going on there. Ukrainians have hit artillery have hit Russian ammo depot across the Dnipro River. Nothing unusual, particularly, just picking out a few things. Worth mentioning this. So I reported on the fact that Bipol, which is a Belarusian partisan group, did a drone attack on an A-50 radar plane that the Russians were using, the mainstay in Belarus, and there was lots of defense from pro-Russian voices saying no, it didn't happen. The satellite images don't really show that there's been any damage, etc., etc. And there's lots of denials. And then the footage came out of a drone landing on top of it, of this plane in a recon mission. And so that led to the theory that, well, they probably have done some damage. They're going to land on top of it, and then they can probably drop a drone on it. Anyway, Lukashenko has now admitted that it's being flown for repairs and it was damaged. So it happened. There was damage. End of. Russian cope, if you like. You can do one. On 7th of March 2023, says a UK intelligence update, Belarusian President Lukashenko confirmed that one of Russia's small fleet of A-50U Mainstay D airborne early warning and control aircraft deployed in Belarus had been damaged. The aircraft was almost certainly attacked by a small uncrewed air system. The Mainstay is likely now being moved to a repair facility at Taganrog in Russia. The transit flight reportedly took place at a lower than usual altitude, likely because of damage to the pressurized cabin. The Mainstay was likely providing situational awareness for a MiG-31K Foxhound D fighter aircraft modified to launch the AS-24 Killjoy air-launched ballistic missile, which Russia sees as a key strategic capability. That's not the one that was used. That was a Kinzhal, which is a dagger. I'm pretty sure that's a different. That designation is a NATO designation. So every Russian missile has like a NATO code for it, and they aren't the same. So these will be called different things under NATO, and I think the UK intelligence there is giving the NATO designation. The modification saw the jet's internal radar removed to balance the airframe, making pilots reliant on external sources of situational awareness, such as Mainstay. It is a realistic possibility that joint Russia-Belarusian air activity will now be forced to rely on ground control and fighter escort until another Mainstay can be deployed. And just on a slightly different topic, well, this is potentially JDAM being used to hit Russian targets. This looks very much like a sort of, as people have said, a kind of NATO explosion, if you like, if that's the right kind of phrase. But yeah, it could well be that was JDAM being used against, I don't know what kind of target, but you can see it's clearly a military target. As a military, are there straight away doing, I don't know, taking on injured or finding out what's going on. Not quite sure, but yeah, it looks like that is a JDAM. Right, on to some not intelligence, but US intelligence chief yesterday admitting that Russia is unlikely to make major Ukraine gains this year, territorially speaking. Goodness me, words. Washington does not believe that Russian military can recover its losses in Ukraine to make territorial gains there this year, the top US intelligence official has said. But she warned that Vladimir Putin still believes that time is on his side. Interestingly, Russian propagandists yesterday were saying that time is not on Russia's side, and they're admitting that things are looking bad, and that the more that Ukraine is able to get weapons from allies and Western sources, the less time is on Russia's side. So there is a change in narrative going on. The assessment presented by the Director of National Intelligence, Avril Haines, at a Senate hearing on Wednesday morning was non-committal on whether Ukraine could take back significant amounts of occupied land in its planned counteroffensive this spring. Haines said that would depend on multiple factors, including the loss of Ukrainian troops and equipment in resisting Russian attacks. She listed Russia's military constraints as including personnel and ammunition shortages, dysfunction within the military leadership, exhaustion, as well as morale challenges and high casualty rates. But at present, the Ukrainian armed forces remain locked in a struggle to defend against Russian offensives across eastern Ukraine, she said. And while these Russian assaults are costly for Russia, the extent to which Ukrainian forces are having to draw down their reserves and equipment as well as suffer further casualties will all likely factor into Ukraine's ability to go on to the offensive later this spring. And this plays into exactly what I'm talking about with regard to Bakhmut. I've been saying that the reason that Ukraine, if they have indeed been pulling in undertrained, mobilized conscripts, if you like, or mobilized troops into Bakhmut to defend is one, because defending is easier than attacking. So you don't need your best troops to do that necessarily, but it is still suboptimal. Why do that? Well, actually, because they want to ring fence their offensive troops and those being trained to do the counteroffensives so that those take place at the optimal level that they can. And this might explain why you are seeing less than optimal troops being sent to Bakhmut to defend. And that fits in with what Haynes is saying here as well. Um, Talking about mobilization, so the Ukrainians have blocked their sort of security service, SBU, has blocked 26 Telegram channels that help men to evade mobilization. So mobilization is still a challenge for Ukraine. It's still something they might need to do en masse. They haven't done a mass mobilization yet. They've kept that as a little bit of headroom to go if things get properly desperate. But there are still ways to evade the mobilization that is taking place, and they are trying to shut those options down for Ukrainians. Right, let's move on to some geopolitics. We'll go first to Georgia. It's not only the majority of Georgians that support NATO, EU integration. We have a two-factor verification on that. We put in our constitution in the Article 78 that all constitutional bodies should take all measures for ensuring the integration. So there is a lot of anger going on in Georgia over the rushed through rules in the Georgian in the lower house, I think it was, in trying to bring in these foreign agent rules so that they basically effectively couldn't join Europe. Any kind of funding from outside entities. I mean, obviously Russia would be able to get around those that law put in place, but this was really designed to stop Europe getting or Georgia getting any closer to Europe. Anyway, people took to the streets in a huge way. Have done for the last couple of days, and during the daytime as well. And even like last night, I think I saw a bunch of Georgians saying I would have been there, but I couldn't get there because of snow. In certain areas outside of Tbilisi, it was very difficult to get there. But nonetheless, they have done such a good job at protesting, including I absolutely love this. So there's quite a lot of young people involved in this as well. Here is they put these horrible sirens to stop people congregating, and instead of leaving the place, they decided to turn it into a rave. Love it, love it. So why not run with it? But great news is the Georgian Dream Party has officially withdrawn the foreign agent bill, which had caused civil unrest and protests across the Georgian capital of Tbilisi over the last 2 nights. Be watching that closely, see whether that definitely happens. But it looks really good news for Georgia and really bad news geopolitically for Russia in the area. I saw another bit of stats yesterday with regard to empty army bases all around the South Caucasus and the whole kind of Eurasian area that just Russians have pulled a lot of their capacity into Ukraine, one would think, and that leaves the whole region really quite potentially something could spark off some serious unrest in or more military dissatisfaction between some of the nations around there that Russia have been doing their best to keep from happening with their own military. So doing the kind of police work in these countries. So it's definitely an area to keep an eye on. Things could go south there. In many different ways. But geopolitically, as far as Russia's concerned, it seems that their influence is waning in certain areas. Georgia is one of them. I don't have to go. So this is talking about now House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. He was invited to go to Ukraine by Zelensky. Now, Zelensky is a shrewd operator. If you get a chance, if you've got Netflix, go and check. I mean, it's like a month old now, but go and check David Letterman's interview. It's called My Next Guest Is, I think that's what it's called, with David Letterman, and check the one he does with Zelensky on Netflix. It's really worth watching, and there are some nuggets in there that give you a window into who Zelensky is and how he's operating. And there were moments where I was absolutely fascinated, emotional moments as well. But what's interesting is that he understands what's going on in the US. Of course he does. And he knows when things are waning. He sent his wife over there to do basically some PR because he knew that they needed to get some surface to air missile systems and knew things were not looking good. He understands Kevin McCarthy, the GOP, and the kickback against Ukraine in certain areas of US politics. He understands that. And here, so he knew that Kevin McCarthy is a problem. He keeps saying that there's no blank check for Ukraine. So cleverly, Zelensky says, "Okay, come on, why don't you come over? Come to Ukraine, come see what it's like." Kevin McCarthy has said, "I don't have to go to Ukraine to understand where there's a blank check or not." So that's a real firm kind of, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to play that game, and I'm going to stay strong on my kind of anti-Ukraine stance, or at least anti-US giving this aid to Ukraine. But it's about understand. I've done segments before on understanding the context of the assistance being given to Ukraine is less than what was being given to spent on Afghanistan, and that was done for 20 odd years. What's been given this whole last year is less than what's been spent in the year in Afghanistan. So you've got to get the US aid in context and understand it. Visiting Ukraine isn't about a blank check or not, says Ukraine Battle Map. It's about showing solidarity and showing you care, like other members of Congress in the US did. It seems he couldn't care less. So that's not gone down well in Ukraine. Right, military aid really quickly. MRAP Wolfhound, so these are mine-resistant ambush protection vehicles designed higher off the ground with slightly different underneath, perhaps, depending on what the make and model is. These might be flat underneath the Wolfhounds. These are UK ones covered in slat armor, or at least this kind of cage armor that protects from RPGs and whatnot. But anyway, they are now being seen in Ukraine. However, they have been in Ukraine previously, so it's not to say these are definitely brand new ones. German Minister of Defense Pistorius with an update on the German Portuguese Leopard 2 tanks and trained personnel. 18 German and 3 Portuguese Leopard 2 tanks, together with trained personnel, will go to Ukraine in March, said Pistorius. The Ukrainian army apparently has received Swedish RBS-70 short-range air defense missile systems. The system can be seen behind the soldier of the newly formed 88th Mechanized Brigade. So these are basically man-pads, man-portable air defense systems. I presume you can put them on your shoulder as well as have them on a tripod here, tripod, sorts it out. These are, your basic 5 kilometer range, 250 to 9 kilometer range, flight altitude 5,000. So these might have it's interesting. They might have a longer range, although 5,000 meters up, so they can't go any higher than 5,000 meters. But 9 kilometer range, that could be interesting. So that's a longer range than other man pads that are often used. Interesting. Canada will locate another $3 million to Ukraine for demining. I did a whole segment on demining the other day. Check my extra out. That's going to be really useful because there will be a ton of those that will need to be deactivated and got rid of all over the east of Ukraine, the east and south of Ukraine. EU ambassadors have agreed to allocate an additional 2 billion euros for the fund that finances military aid to Ukraine. This decision is a clear signal of the EU's unwavering commitment to the military support of the Ukraine and other partners, reports the Swedish EU presidency. I wonder how much of this will have to do with ammunition. There's been a lot of talk about the EU getting together to source ammunition as a collective. That'll be really, really useful. In fact, it's one of the most important things that Ukraine need at the moment. Switzerland once again hampers the Allies' effort to arm Ukraine. Earlier, the lower house of the Swiss parliament rejected a proposal to ease a ban on the re-export of ammunition. So that has happened again. As I understand it, the Swiss federal government's position is that they will continue to obey the law until it is changed, which in a direct democracy, a majority always can do. So it's whether they can change that law that's the question, isn't it? Whether they have the desire to do that. Anyway, and that will probably depend somewhat on pressure, not only from the public, but pressure from their arms industry that might be getting slammed for not being able to commit, or there will be many nations that won't buy stuff off Switzerland because they know they won't be able to resell it on afterwards, and so might go to alternative sources for that munition. and the Swiss companies, I'm sure, will. I did a little bit of a segment on this previously, that they are losing out on business. Rheinmetall, I think, have picked up, for example, Gepard ammunition business. So yeah, we'll see how that goes. Anyway, that's today's news. Hope that's useful. Please like, subscribe, and share. Thank you so much for your support, and I'll hopefully speak to you later. I'm not feeling too well today, but we'll see.